Life of love. Life of love. With Joy Hilsen.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Life of Love, where we gather each week to bring forth a message for the highest good and to bring forth a idea, a curiosity, an inspiration to lift up your life, or even if you're feeling guided, to share it with somebody who you may think of. And your attention, your ears. I appreciate everyone who's tuning in each week as we grow this community and we share. And I invite you to go to lifeofloveenjoy.com if you want to make any comments or have any suggestions. There's a forum there, and it's open for discussion and further inspiration if you're interested. So I want to make sure everyone knows about that, because I don't usually mention it every time. I'm feeling like I need to share that more. Today is a great opportunity to meet a dear soul. His name is Colin Kingsmill, and he's coming to us from Nova Scotia, just outside the city. And he has a unique lens, and he has a lot of experience with humanity and growth and soul path. And so it's just going to be a great weaving of inspiration and stories. I know there's going to be stories. So we were drawn together because he believes that we've lost touch with our sacred humanity, and division, identity politics, negative news, and different corporate events have divided us. And in my heart, I believe we're all united by more common things than the things that divide us. And so I was really drawn to invite Colin in because there's so much noise right now. And I would love to give inspiration to how to, disperse some of those division lines, that so we can meet on a common ground and help humanity get to where we want it to be. Like, I know it's common to say new earth or, this new world, but really, we need to create it in ourselves. It's not any leader. It's not any politics. It's not economics. This is us. So, Colin, thank you for being on Life of Love. I'm so delighted and honored to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm so happy to be here. It feels like I'm in the same room as you, so it's great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I know, it does feel close, and I appreciate that. My pleasure. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to start out by just asking you what living fearless looks like to you. And maybe it would be a story or some insight you can share. But I sort of want to start out with fearlessness, because I think that fear is often what causes the initial divide. If there's scarcity or the illusion of separation, and that causes fear in so many people. So yeah, how, for you to say live it with fear, be fearless, I believe that you'd have to have an experience with that, or the opposite. So what can you share?
Sure. When I'm talking about fear, I'm really talking about the fear of not being yourself, right? The fear of not being who you really are authentically. And I think we live in a world, both for men and for women and everybody in between, where we're almost not obligated, but pushed towards living what our partner, friends, family, society, culture, job wants us to live, right? And I speak of fearlessness because I know that for the first chapter of my life, for certain, I don't think I was living in fear, but I was certainly designing a life that I felt would be approved by others. So I lived, for 10 or 15 years of that first chapter, whether it was my professional career or my marriage or whatever, the sort of success-driven existence, right? To prove myself and to prove my worthiness to others, for fear of not being accepted and not being loved and not feeling worthy and not feeling included. And it was a reaction to my childhood and having and the way I grew up and things like that. So I remember bursting out of that life of fear of not being accepted and not being loved and not being worthy and not being this and not being wealthy and not being all those, successful and all those things. I remember hitting an absolute wall in 2001, and I had a very interesting kind of spiritual awakening. And within 48 hours, I had decided to absolutely change everything in my life. So I guess what my message about fearlessness is, how much is it tethering you down? Because I know from my own experience and on my own skin how it held me down, how it held me confined, and how it held me constrained in a life that became full of depression and anxiety and anger and all of those other emotions that kind of flow out from fear and guilt, etc., etc. I began to experience what it's like to live without those tethers, right? To be free from that psychological suffering of fear. I'm just on a mission to help people live that untethered life, that freedom from psychological suffering. And while it bounds so many people down and it is such a destructive force, I think my formula is, taking a couple steps back and looking at humanity and looking at the mask and looking at integrity and kind of recognizing where you are and recognizing who you are so you can become fearless.
Mm.
But for me, fearless or fear is just such a drag on who you can be and who you should be and who you could be, So the way I'm living now is just so light and so bright and so much easier and so much more in flow because I don't have those weights on my feet, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, maybe not, but
Well, no, I mean, yeah, you're on the conceptual level, you are, but I'm just wondering. So you said you've hit the wall. Is it you're escaping? You're performing. You're checking off the boxes.
yeah,
You had the bank account. You had the job. You had the marriage. You had all these things, but you hit a wall, and you felt heavy. How did you? Because I think that a lot of people are hitting a wall over and over. And how did you know that that was the wall? How did you know? What was the spiritual thing that happened where you're like, I just need to take the laundry basket and tip it over, right? Because it sounded like you just started over. So how did you know? Yeah.
It's a great analogy, actually, that tipping the laundry basket over. I love that. It was kind of an intersection of three things. First of all, my body was saying no, right? And I wasn't listening, right? So the depression and the anxiety and the anger and all of that was penting up, right? On one side, I had a traffic accident where I literally spun out of control on a mountain road in the snow, and I could have flown into a lake, but I ended up on the other side of the road on the side of the mountain and lived. So my body was shutting down. I was getting these very clear messages of spinning out of control, so much so that my friends were saying, you need to relax. You're going to have a heart attack. You're not even 40. You're 35. So somebody pushed me to learn Reiki and to learn some, and stuff that I had never given any thought to, right? I'm like, what is this stuff? Okay, I'll try it. And I did a rebirthing exercise where, to just adjust your breathing, right? To kind of a more calm pace. And it turned into a past life regression. And it was so interesting that that same day I went and saw my psychiatrist, who was also a historian, a Buddhist monk, a Swiss airline pilot, or no, a Swiss military fighter pilot, and a historian. Did I say historian? What? Historian, Buddhist. Whoa. Anyway, psychiatrist as well.
That's quite a resume.
It's an amazing resume. And I went into his little weird office and he said, oh, well, I explained what just happened. I'm like, look at all these stories that I was in. And he actually was able to, he said, well, that's not England, that's southern Italy because of that seal that you're telling me about. And it's a historic relevance. And that's not, I thought it was maybe, Istanbul or something. No, that's an ancient trading route between Morocco and Algiers. And so he was just this pragmatic historical recount of what I had done. And he had he didn't make any comment on whether it was past life or not, but I came out of that day with the realization that I didn't have to achieve anything more in this lifetime. That actually our soul, well, this is what I believed anyway, our soul is on a longer continuum than this sort of 60 or 80 years that we're here. So, Julia, it was really an intersection of body saying no, universe spinning me out of control, and then an experience that was kind of spiritual. I mean, I'm not sure quite how to label it. And it all intersected at once. And it was really, it was good. It was an early wake up call to make dramatic change.
I love that. I love it so much because it took the pressure off of you.
Yeah.
When you got to see, and how amazing the synchronicity that your therapist had that insight, and it just shines a light on the divine plan that, there's some pragmatic thing, whether it's your matrix or whatever you want to prescribe to, but there's some divinity, there's some master plan that, we get these drops, and we can see them or not, or we can get spun out of control. And these things, they happen for a reason, and it's tuning in and saying, okay, what am I supposed to see here? And that, you got the freedom because you realized how many lives you had lived and all the things you had done, and you don't have to take it so seriously. We get redos.
We get redos. And I think my whole thing too, in that instance, or in that moment in time, up until then, I had been so ambitious to achieve that checklist that you were just speaking about in a relatively short period of time. It was just this kind of release of pressure. And it was like, oh, okay, well, I've got more time to play or be or do whatever I'm supposed to do here. I don't need to rush. So I just let go and decided really to design the next chapter in a more intentional way, in a different way.
Well, that's
totally
beautiful.
Different way, actually.
Yeah.
Totally different.
The whole idea that you're enough, no matter
right.
No matter what, you're enough.
Well, and that you hear that kind of a lot these days, right? But it's not that obvious, right? We don't get taught that we're enough. We get taught the opposite. And I think, as you mentioned in the introduction to me, I think that's gotten even almost worse today than when it was for me. So when I was kind of doing my checklist and, having to get an MBA and all that other stuff, right? I think the list was simpler then. It feels like the list today is almost even more divisive and more of a challenge for people, because you've got to be different. You've got to be, and I don't want to get into gender and all this stuff, but it's like it just feels much more confusing and challenging today even than when it was back then. Back then it was just like, well, get an MBA, get the right cars, travel to the right places, right vacations, right, all that really easy stuff.
Yeah, now we have these layers of
of complexity,
shame and guilt, and
yes,
it just gets so deep, and you're supposed to not have privilege, and you're supposed to question, you got to ask pronouns and the whole thing, like you don't want to offend anyone, because then you're going to look like you're ignorant, and
it's really tough.
Everything is taken so seriously. Yes, I understand, but the density is, it's intimidating.
Yeah, it's a minefield, right? It's a minefield or tripwires that you've got to kind of dance through today,
or not, or say, I'm doing the best I can, and this isn't that serious.
Right. But I don't think people are really rewarded for that, or taught that, or allowed that. It feels as though you still need to comply to, and especially now with social media, I think, which has ramped up the volume on all of that, right? It's I've got to comply, I've got to be present, I've got to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a bit of a failure in our world that we're not allowed to just be enough, right?
Right. And so, I mean, it's interesting. My last recording was a man talking about teaching boys to have, their values, to know what they stand for
Mm,
so that they can be proud and stand strong when the pressures come at them. They know what their true north is. And this
yes.
speaks to that a lot.
Yeah.
But it needs to start with our children, I think. Well, we
Yeah.
can set the example, but also to, let our children know that they're enough, and that, that, okay, they're going to get grades, but the grades don't define you. Like I feel like it's coming, and but it needs to be, like you said, a conscious way to live, and you said intentional. You set up the second phase of your life with more intention.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
maybe the way out of it is just to be aware that your intentions matter, that you don't have to just. I went through it. I checked off boxes. I was miserable. I felt like I was in a loveless marriage. I felt like everything looked good, but it was just empty.
Right.
And so, questioning it, but I didn't I didn't travel across the world. I just sort of had my own hit the wall. Or you
Sure.
feel it in your body. You know when things aren't going right. You feel it in your stomach. Your body gives you clues. You get into stupid car accidents. Yours was very traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we all get these signs, right?
And again, we're not taught to listen. We're not taught to listen to the signs. We're not taught to see the signs. We're not taught to see when it's right there in front of you, whether it's numbers or serendipity or synchronicity or whatever you want to call it. We discount it because we get entrapped in our screens and entrapped in our social media and stuff. Yeah, very gosh, just so important to I think, and you're right. I think it is the youth of tomorrow that needs to learn these things. And we are raised. I don't have kids, but you look at youth today, and they're the most anxiety ridden of any generation, and they're also the most medicated, and they're also the ones getting the most therapy. So we have to ask ourselves, what's wrong? Like, what are the real epidemics here, or the real pandemics? What's really going on? That kind of leads back to my humanity thing, but we can dive into that later.
I'm open to diving into it now.
Sure.
Well, you have your movement called Enough Already,
Hmm.
the Enough Already movement. I guess my audience know about how that's fitting into your mission and how that evolved, because I think that'll give us some insight and to offer people options, and then they can see if something resonates. So yeah, let's try that.
Right. So how it evolved was, for the longest time, I was focused on fear and being fearless, and I was writing about fear. And I started to, in the last couple of years, I started to envision or imagine that it wasn't just about that. What did that mean, and where did it come from? So I kept taking steps back and going, well, where is this coming from? And I came up with my sort of 4 pillars of my mission, being humanity, integrity, fearlessness, and freedom. And I kind of started with humanity because I thought, what would life be like if we remembered our collective humanity on this little rock, right? We're spinning, I don't know what it is in miles per hour, but it's 1,600 kilometers an hour on our axis, right? So we're spinning around on a little rock, flying through a galaxy, and yet there's so much division, and there's so much hatred, and there's so much anger, and there's just so much conflict. So my mission is to remember our collective humanity, remember that we are one lineage of human beings on this little rock, right? And if you can remember that, I think corporations might make food differently. I think healthcare might be different. I think conflict might be different. I think peace might be different. I think the way we treat others would be different. So it's this idea of remember who you really are, right? And if you can remember who you really are and remember that collectivity that we all are one, and you can then live a life of integrity that is, be your true self. without the masks, right? Take the masks off. And because so much of life today, modern life, at least in the West for us in Canada and you guys in the US, is living for others and living what expectations. So if you can live in integrity, right, that's going to lighten you, right? And if you can live without fear, that's going to make you even lighter. And if you can untether yourself from psychological suffering, what are the possibilities? That's my big question, right? What are the possibilities if we remembered our humanity? Each of us lived in integrity. Each of us lived without fear. And that might mean changing your tribe, changing your family, changing your friends, changing your job, changing your city. It can be very scary. I'm not saying that the start of it, but it might mean total radical change. What are the possibilities? To me, they seem unlimited. They seem incredible. They seem really, really full of joy and unlimited possibilities, and this idea of being untethered. So I'm probably not answering your question again, but that's kind of where, for me, where this idea of remembering your humanity stems from, and how living fearlessly is kind of downstream from that. And downstream from that is this idea of freedom. And not so much in a sort of Second Amendment or First Amendment way, but really freedom from psychological suffering that is holding so many people down. I mean, the stories that we are telling ourselves are so destructive, and so they consume so much energy. And not to sound woo-woo to my friends and clients, but I just ask them, like, how much fuel is that costing you, right?
The cost of that.
What's your fuel tank, right? Like,
Yeah.
how are you?
So, yeah, if you were to take one lens off of humanity, I know it's hard to pick one, but what if you could wave your magic wand and be like, okay, I'm going to remove this lens. It's gone. I'm going to let everyone see through this eye for, even if it's just for a day. What do you think would be the most transforming lens to remove?
For me, it needs to be the reimagination of the corporation, because I think the corporation has detached humanity from the endeavor, And I don't know if I'm answering your question again, but for me, the legal entity of the corporation around the world is allowing for, I don't know, us to be eating manufactured edible product as opposed to real food.
Real
What I
food.
mean?
Oh my gosh, you like read my mind, because you're talking and I was like, I think we got to start with our food supply, because everyone's so clouded. I mean,
Yes.
there's so much crud in our food. There's no reason we should have genetically modified food. There's no reason to be throwing pesticides on our crops and letting our bodies figure out what's the pesticide and what's nutrition. It's just horrible.
Well,
horrible.
But it's not only sort of morally horrible, but also if you think about the impact on cognitive ability and the impact on mental health and the impact on physical health and the impact on comorbidities and obesity and all of the rest.
And then what it does to our soil, because then you can't grow something the other way because you've killed everything in the soil. So it's Mother Earth.
Exactly.
I couldn't agree with you 200 million times percent more that we got to start with the food supply. Like if people could eat like real food for 1 week and feel the difference in their brain fog, in their energy level, their resource, they could feel the abundance. Our earth wants to give us the abundance, but this layer of contamination has clouded us.
Absolutely.
I'm with you.
Absolutely. I think the corporation, the legal entity of the corporation, is allowing companies to make food that is not food, right? And it is creating a very sick society. And you see the numbers in everything, Julie, from teen suicides to mental health disorders to, I mean, the list just goes on. And it's almost as if, to me, it feels like the biggest human travesty of our time, that the food that we consume is not food. And the impact is so immense. It has an impact on our microbiome, which feeds our brain, which feeds our soul, which it's just all interconnected. And for me, it all stems from food. And there's people out there like Kaylee and Casey Means, who are doing an incredible job around this. He was a whistleblower from Coca-Cola, and she was a surgeon at Stanford, and they've just kind of woken up to this. Even the medical system in the United States divides the body into 41 specialties, right? So nobody's looking at this as a whole. They're looking at the ear, the throat, or the eye, or the lung, or the heart. It's all just broken up. And with a contaminated food supply, it just keeps people sick and in a daze, right? Like you say, and medicated.
And I love that the universe raised our awareness by letting the sirens go. We were talking about this.
Did you hear that?
Yes. And it's perfect. It's like, people listen. This is really, really important.
Yeah.
The idea that this manufactured food and the mass-produced meats and it's like,
well, the meat that's not meat, or and I live in a town of 1,000 people. It's a village, so ambulances are going by are a rarity. So you were right. That was an absolute signal from the universe to say, wake up, people, or just confirming what we're talking about anyway, for sure.
Definitely.
So that's my biggest thing, is food. And then the second for me, a close second, is shelter. How is it that we have hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, completely addicted and without a roof over their heads? I find that, food and shelter.
Mm-hmm. I
find that just such a disconnect from humanity. How is it possible that we've become so desensitized to this? It's so easy in 2024 to, talk about things like colonization or this or that, or we're racists or blah, blah, all the tripwires of today. But I say to my colleagues and friends and anybody that wants to listen, what are the atrocities of today that we are committing, that we have our blinders on for, that in 5 or 10 or 20 years, they're going to look back and go, what were they doing? That I think, and I think it's around food. I think it's around shelter and addiction and mental health. I think it's around things like gender affirming care of minors and children that is mutilating them potentially.
Yeah.
So what are the blind spots? What are the blind spots today? It's easy to look in the rearview mirror and go, oh, they were colonialists, right? Yeah, okay, I know. That it's awful what we did to our First Nations, but what are we doing right now that people are desensitized to and going, oh, not me?
Right. So in your theme of visualizing, of thinking about having an intention of what it could be, I'd like to challenge people to think about the perfect food source. Think about how we can be more interdependent on our neighbor for food and value the farmer. I mean, the local farmer, I don't know. I just have this thing about hands. And maybe it was from my grandfather. He worked in a factory, and then when he retired, he always had a big garden. But I love to look at his hands, the creases where the dirt got settled in, like a man's hands that work the land. So it's an absolute work of art to me. I just could stare at the veins, the nails, like everything. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm so intrigued by hands and the power of the hand and how underutilized our hands really are in the day-to-day basis, and how much happier we'd be if we had more connection with our hands in the ground and we'd respect it so much more. But I would challenge people to just think about how things could be different with our food.
Yeah, that's a great challenge. Go there. I would add, can I add to your challenge?
Mm-hmm.
While you're thinking about that, remember that you are the environment. We speak of the environment and Mother Nature as if it's something else, something separate from us. But it is us, right? So, what if, anyway,
Well, it just came, the picture that came in my mind when you're talking was, the bronchioles and the parts of your lungs, they look just like tree branches when you look at them underneath a microscope. There's
100%.
so many things in our body that if you look at closely, it looks like nature.
Bingo. Exactly.
And yeah. So
exactly.
we're not separated. And we're stewards of this earth. We really are. We're going to be judged on how well we took care of this earth.
Exactly.
It's a tough one.
Exactly my point. Remember your humanity and its connection to Mother Nature, because it is you, right? And when we don't love ourselves, we fill ourselves with addiction or coping mechanisms or alcohol or pills or whatever, and we're doing the same thing with the planet. It's a reflection of our own ecosystems, our own ecologies, that we're being so damaging.
And I love that you're not saying it's the carbon emissions of big factories. No, it's each person. This isn't a global. I don't even want to use the word. This is people making choices that are best for themselves that happen to be also good for the earth. Because when you take really good care of yourself, you're taking good care of the earth. The earth is going to be here. We'll probably self-destruct before Mother Earth. You can drive down the highway and you can see grass growing in the cracks. The earth is going to take over. I mean, if grass can grow in the cracks of a highway, it's good.
So this is so interesting, and I have goosebumps because I was on a road yesterday that is very untraveled, and it's cement, but it's so old that there's ruts. There's actually really high ruts in the road, and I was thinking, I didn't tell my colleague that I was driving with, but all the grass is starting to take the road over, right? It's starting to, and I was thinking, wow, you think that these concrete streets are just built to last, but no, Mother Nature is about to lift this thing off the ground, and it's going to disappear. That's so interesting not interesting. It's serendipitous and synchronous that you just said that. I was just witnessing that yesterday. Precisely that thing.
All the time, and I'm going to go further, and anyone who listens to me regularly knows I say things off the wall, but just acknowledge the trees and the plants around you. Just give them love. Just say hello. Name my plants. I've gotten to the point where every plant in my house has a name. And I bought my son a plant and we named it while I moved him into his condo. And I'm like, I think this is Athena. And I watched that plant move. When I said her name, she liked her name, Athena. I mean, just go there. Idea. There's a consciousness.
I've got a little plant here that I was certain it was going to die. And I was like, oh, come on. I was, just giving it some Reiki and going, you're going to be okay. And it's actually kind of really starting to flourish. You're
coming back.
It's coming back. Look, I'll show you.
Let me see. I got to see.
It's coming back. It was really just kind of sad. And I had a couple of these yellow leaves and it was like, oh, come on, you're going to make it. But now
and the sun was coming in strong for it today.
Yeah, I'm going to open up this. So I'm going to name it. I'm not sure what to name it.
You'll know. I mean, if you just sit, the leaves will move a little.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a little shimmer when you say the right name.
Okay. I'm gonna do that after our call.
Well, I've just adored this time we've had today. We're coming up on the end of it. But yeah, I mean, it's not huge. It's not a huge consciousness shift. It's appreciating what's around you already and the resources. So I love the idea that we're going to get back to more local. We're going to start canning or have some pride in our food again. Because when you have a good meal and it's made with love, you can taste the difference. And we deserve that. We deserve to have nourishing food, and we don't need to rush around throwing fast food into our bodies.
No.
We just don't.
The one thing I might leave your listeners with is this idea of it doesn't have to be like this. Each one of them can begin to make an impact today. So it doesn't have to be like this.
Doesn't have
We can
to
do
be
better.
like this. Thank you, brother. This has
Thank
been
you.
amazing.
Yeah, maybe I should come. We should have a seasonal conversation. We can, at the beginning of every season, we can have a.
Okay, I'm up for it. I love
Let's
it.
do it. I'll see you at the beginning of winter.
Sounds good. It's gonna be different for you than me.
Yeah, it's around the corner.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Julie. Cheers.
Cheers.